Here's John Shannon, his show, 100% Hockey with Darren Millard, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada and the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia. How are you?
Just a minute. I've got to log on and buy a bottle of gin.
Yeah. Yeah, gin season's coming, too.
I don't even drink gin, but I'll buy it for you guys.
Good. Thank you, John. Thank you for supporting. We'll let everyone know at Resurrection Spirits. Hey, what are you anticipating out of the Vancouver Canucks between now and Friday?
Well, how is Quinn Hughes? I think that might dictate a little bit of what's right or wrong with Vancouver and trying to figure out what they need to do. I still think that they need to find another goal scorer. When you get rid of one like JT Miller, you have to replace the goal scorer. So they have to find a way to get a top six forward somehow to get some goal scoring back on this hockey club. That to me is the most obvious thing. I don't think there's any issue on the blue line anymore if Hughes is healthy enough. But at the same time, I think that they do need to find a way to get more scoring.
They aren't apparently going to get aggressive in the rental market. What do you think? Players with term, do you think they're available here?
I think there are some available. That becomes the issue. The other thing is saying you're not involved in the rental. That's on Monday or Tuesday. That may change by Thursday. If there's a ton of pressure, and I think the three of us would agree, there's a ton of pressure to get this hockey club into the playoffs. They may not win the Stanley Cup this year, but you know as well as I do, there will be a demand from many people on many levels in this organization to get into the postseason. When you consider that a home date at Rogers Arena is probably north of $5 million, you need to find a way to get into the postseason. And I think that that's the biggest pressure.
Yeah. On that, John, first round gates are pooled, right? Between the teams. No. It's just the other revenue sources that come on in.
Well, I mean, it's all hockey related revenue, Matt. But at the same time, the Canucks are in much better shape if they have home games in the postseason, and they're able to get, whether it's their food and beverage, whether it's they have to share their per caps when it comes to souvenirs and memorabilia, but you're putting more money in your pocket if you have a home game in the postseason.
For those that want the Canucks to buy and get into the playoffs, how much of that is slowed down by the fact that there are 6 chase teams within 5 points of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference? By comparison, there's only 3 that fit that criteria in the West. Everybody feels like they're in it except for Pittsburgh and Buffalo in the East. So is everybody buying at this point?
Well, we saw the Boston Bruins start to sell today. So the answer is there will be some general managers, as Steve Yzerman has been the last couple of deadlines, that become pretty pragmatic about where their teams are and what they need to do. And is it more advantageous in the long term to start to sell off? As again, I think Don Sweeney has finally realized that.
Philly, I think, is probably there too. Yeah.
Well, Philly has admitted it from the beginning. Philly has admitted it they are in the sell mode. Keith Jones told us on our show 2 weeks ago, we will always be in the sell mode this year. Don't worry. Don't pretend to think you know what's going to happen in Philly, because they are going to move, and they already have moved people out in order to try to prepare for the next 2 or 3 seasons. I think Buffalo is probably in the sell mode as well. So there are going to be enough teams out there that you can go and cherry pick and find somebody to help your squad to get into the postseason. I think Seattle's in that boat too.
Seattle with Gord and Tanev, Brandon expected to be dealt.
I wouldn't be surprised if Alexiak goes too, guys.
Right, Alexiak is fair. His name has been out there too, John. Good catch. John, I sit here and I digest this Edmonton Oilers trade with Boston for Trent Frederick, and I look at this Oilers team and I think to myself, because remember, fellas, at the beginning of let me take you back to September and October, Mr. Shannon, when we were talking about the Vancouver Canucks in the vein of the Oilers are your derby, you have to get over Edmonton. As I sit here and size up the Oilers 3/4 the way through, I mean, they may have had a worse offseason than the Canucks did. That if the Canucks had actually done it, hit it this offseason and in season, we might be talking about a gettable Edmonton Oilers team, or a more gettable Edmonton Oilers team than some might have perceived. A thought or two about where you think the Oilers are and what the Oilers can be, and whether this is a chance wasted for the Vancouver Canucks to get past the McDavid-Draisaitl club.
Well, I think it's a chance wasted by the Canucks, period, at this point.
Fair.
But we're not in the postseason yet. You know, this has become a league of get in and win. You know, can something happen in the next 4 days that changes people's opinion? Or can finally some people on the Vancouver Canucks pull up their socks and play the way they were supposed to play, or get healthy enough and be a difference maker? I mean, so I think it might be just, Matt, a little too early to suggest that. That said, the Edmonton Oilers did not have a good offseason. And Stan Bowman, and by the way, let's not throw it all on Stan Bowman, because they went through a little bit of a bridge between Kenny Holland leaving and Stan Bowman showing up that probably caused a little bit of disconcern, or concern rather, for the organization. You know, they got a little tougher, and you know, which tells me that Evander Kane's not showing up sooner than later from his injury. Trent Frederick is a tough customer and can really help the club when he's healthy.
I was going to say, we'll see when he gets in the lineup.
Yeah, right. And that's part of it. The other one is, the name on the trade that might fascinate a few people, because I remember him as a junior, is Max Jones. This guy, if he's given an opportunity, might be a difference maker. Not prolific, but he may help. He might, have some quality improvement to the depth of the organization in Edmonton. You know, he went to Anaheim with such great pedigree and then kind of just disappeared. I don't know why. I don't know how he disappeared. And by the time he got to Boston, he spent most of the year in the American League. So Max Jones could be somebody that could actually, I think, at some point, help an organization that really has never been able to compensate for the loss of Dylan Holloway. And that's, they tried Matt Savoy in the last 3 or 4 games to see if he could fill that void. I think that's just an experiment that we'll probably see Savoy go back to Bakersfield. But Max Jones could be somebody that could fill that void.
Nobody's having a prolific season in the Pacific Division in terms of the teams. The best teams by points, the top 2 are both in the Central. Albeit the Jets, as great a year as they're having, until you've done it, you haven't done it. The old get in and anything could happen. Could you make the argument this is a year where you'd be tempted to think that? Not so much from the Canucks. I think people here are jaded by what the Canucks are to some degree. So we can even just extract the Canucks out of that argument. Just objectively, generally speaking, does this look like a year that's ripe for, hey, anything could happen, given that it's a Jets team that has always had trouble advancing in the playoffs?
Totally. I really believe that. I mean, there have been indications that, there are upwards of 10 teams that could win the Stanley Cup. The moment you say 10 teams winning the Stanley Cup, the standings aren't that important at this point. It's being prepared for the middle of April that becomes important. There's a chance still that Colorado, it's just a chance, Colorado could be a wild card team. Based on what Colorado's done, do you want to face Colorado in the first round? Not a chance. So the get in and win mentality, I think, is probably more prevalent this year than it has been for the last few.
Who are you expecting big moves from between now and Friday?
I actually think Winnipeg will make some moves. I really do. I think Winnipeg feels that they need to bolster their second line center and something on the blue line. I think Toronto needs to be able to do that. When you think of what Florida's done, you think how well Tampa is playing. The Maple Leafs, who are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games, and still aren't in first place now, last I checked, I think that Brad Treliving is going to feel he has to do something in order to get over the hump. There's a ton of pressure in Toronto this year, not just on Treliving, certainly not on Berube, but on Brendan Shanahan, to have a difference of a season this year in order to try to make sure that they can do this again.
You have long been bullish on the Canucks playoff chances. Talk to me about Calgary and Utah, two teams in their orbit. We keep hearing that Utah, it's a new world order there, and they're going to get
the Blues too
aggressive. But Craig Conroy, of course, has already made some moves this year, including that big deal with Philly for Frost and Farabee. But talk to me about Calgary and Utah and whether or not you think they're going to be aggressive by Friday.
Here's the thing. I don't think Calgary's going to change its plan. I think Calgary's going to stay the course, and if they can do a deal, it's going to be a trade that helps them for 2 or 3 years. They're not in the rental market, I don't believe. I think that Craig Conroy is sticking to his plan. I think ownership is going to make him stick to his plan, and so therefore I don't see Calgary doing anything really drastic to help their roster. I think any trade that happens in Calgary helps them 2 years down the line. And I think that's their philosophy, and that's what they're going to do. Utah's in a different boat. I think what you'll find again is that there's an owner there in Ryan Smith that wants to make sure that they're having fun in Utah. People are enjoying hockey in Utah right now, much more than they're enjoying the basketball team, I can assure you that. And so would I be surprised that Billy Armstrong makes a move and tries to do something? He's done a good job of creating assets in draft picks. So I would not be surprised to see Utah do something that tries to get them over the top. And then, as Blake brought up, St. Louis, the loss to Dallas on Sunday night was their first loss since the break in regulation. And the Blues are playing very good. Binnington and Hofer are very good in goal. They're getting a lot of quality play finally out of guys like Robert Thomas and Braden Shannon. So the question of who's going to leave, well, they're this close to the playoffs. I'll be surprised if Doug Armstrong does anything drastic now, particularly after the success of the last 7 days.
You referenced Conroy, just for context on Calgary, Conroy is actually in a pretty enviable position because outside of Dan Vladar, he doesn't really have any UFAs to be with value. So, he doesn't have to move anyone out. And as you say, he can look entirely big picture long term without sort of the.
But you referenced the plan in Calgary. What's the plan? Like, you've got Huberdeau and Kadri in their mid-30s and signed for 5 more years. Like, how do you get around that plan?
Fair.
4 for Kadri, like 17 more years for Huberdeau. Like, it's not promising for. I don't know how Conroy extracts himself from this and starts to turn the page.
Well, I do think that he's accrued some assets. I do think the young guys that they got in Frost and Farabee from Philadelphia are a start of that. Would I be surprised to see one of those 2 guys move at the deadline? No, but that's not helping them make the playoffs. That's building for the future, Blake. That's what that's doing. You do have to wonder if people are going to knock on the door, particularly for Kadri, who does have playoff experience, is a champion, and can Conroy get a king's ransom for Nazem Kadri, even though he is signed long term? And by the way, by the time the cap gets put into place for the next couple of years, Nazem Kadri's contract might actually be reasonable.
No, the contract is fine. It's just he doesn't get younger with the cap going up. Right. That's the problem.
But again, Craig's not. My point was, I don't think Craig's out there doing something to say we're going to make a trade to get us over the top and into the playoffs.
Right, and has no pressure to sell his UFAs also. So,
None.
yeah. Lastly, John, and you were a huge JT Miller fan every time we brought his name up. I'm sure you're seeing what he's doing with the Rangers. We're asking our Missouri Mitsubishi poll question: did the Canucks trade the wrong guy? I know it's very early, but would you be sweating it if you were in Alvin and Rutherford's shoes?
I think they knew that when JT Miller left, that JT Miller was going to be a factor for the Rangers. I think it would be silly not to assume that he was going to be a quality player in an environment that allowed him to succeed. New York has allowed JT Miller to succeed. In fact, based on what you've seen, you wonder if this isn't JT Miller's team already. That's the amazing thing. You know, the other centers, like Mika Zibanejad, is now playing better, but JT Miller kind of drove the boat to get Zibanejad going. And you know, I like the Canucks. I've always thought that the Rangers would make the playoffs, even though Chris Drury seems to be selling team players off. I think that there's probably going to be information we'll never know, Matt, is if they did try to move Pettersson, what was the return? And we just don't know what the return was on a Pettersson deal. And at first blush, if you had to make and get rid of one of the two, it made more sense to get rid of the older guy. It did. It made more sense. Pettersson is one of those guys that if he went somewhere else, he could haunt you for a decade. A decade. JT Miller, I don't think would haunt the Canucks for a decade. He's going to haunt you for the next couple of years, but I don't think he's going to haunt you for a decade. Remember, this is a guy that bounced around. I mean, did it bother Tampa that JT had success in Vancouver? Last I checked, I think they won 2 Stanley Cups when he wasn't there. So it's one of those ones where hindsight is, oh yeah, get rid of Pettersson and keep Miller. I just don't know what they would have got for Pettersson because of the contract.
All righty, sir. Well, big day Friday. Looking forward to it. Thank you for your efforts here, and look forward to catching up next week when the dust is settled, John.
Let's hope the dust settles. That's the thing. The dust, by the way, it's the Vancouver Canucks. The dust never settles.
Never settles here. No, never settles
Dust
here.
Bowl. Perpetual.
But you get yourself to resurrectionspirits.ca, get one of those S&P gins, okay, and it'll make your Friday a whole lot better.
Yeah, there you go.
Order on Rush.
I don't drink gin, but I'm buying it for you guys.
That's much obliged.
We appreciate it.